Karakia inoi tātou. E te atua kārawa, e tūwhira ana ngā kau katoa ki a koe, e mohiotia ana ngā hiahia katoa, e kore hoki e ngaro i a koe te mea huna. Whakahangia iho tō wairua tapu, hei whakamā i ngā whakaro o mātou ngā kau. Kia tino arohae mātou ki a koe, kia tika ai te whakanui i tō ingoa tapu, ko ihu karaiti hoki tō mātou ariki. Āmene. A reading from the book of Genesis, chapter 37, and beginning at verse 12. Soon after this, Joseph's brothers went to pasture their father's flocks at Shechem. When they had been gone for some time, Jacob said to Joseph, "Your brothers are pasturing the sheep at Shechem. Get ready, and I will send you to them." "I'm ready to go," Joseph replied. "Go and see how your brothers and the flocks are getting along," Jacob said. "Then come back and bring me a report." So Jacob sent him on his way, and Joseph travelled to Shechem from their home in the valley of Hebron. When he arrived there, a man from the area noticed him wandering around the countryside. "What are you looking for?" he asked. "I'm looking for my brothers," Joseph replied. "Do you know where they're pasturing their sheep?" "Yes," the man told him. "They've moved on from here, but I heard them say, 'Let's go on to Dothan.'" So Joseph followed his brothers to Dothan and found them there. When Joseph's brothers saw him coming, they recognized him in the distance. As he approached, they made plans to kill him. "Here comes the dreamer," they said. "Come on, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns. Then we can tell our father a wild animal has eaten him. Then we'll see what becomes of his dreams." Hear what the Spirit is saying to the church. Thanks be to God. Now, I guess many of you know that today is Shrove Tuesday. Today is the very last day of the season before Lent. It's a time when we spend time considering the glory that's been revealed through Jesus Christ. And as we come in preparation for Lent, we finish up with that contemplation of Jesus' glory and turn ourselves towards following in his footsteps in particular ways. We turn towards a life of discipline, of sacrifice, often of giving something up for the period of Lent so that we can condition ourselves for the Christian life more fully. But today's the last day where we actually keep our focus somewhere else, which is on what God has done for us. And this rather unpleasant story about Joseph and his brothers, none of whom come across as particularly good characters, is one that gives us a little insight into the way that God works, even in the midst of the brokenness and even the misbehaviour of people who are part of his community, part of his family. In this story, we see the way in which Joseph is treated badly by his brothers. If you know the story beforehand, you know that Joseph himself hasn't covered himself in glory up until now either. And so it's perhaps no surprise that his brothers react this way, though the extremity of their reaction is awful and shocking. As the story goes on, though, we're able to see that through the brokenness of human action, through the brokenness of human wrongdoing, and through the failure of human beings to live up to the image of God that's found in us, we see God weaving something out of that brokenness. And in a sense, this is a fitting end to the season of Epiphany as we transition into Lent, because we recognize that God's glory is made visible to us. The glory that's seen in the face of Jesus Christ is made evident to us in the way he weaves good from the brokenness, from the failure, from the sickness of the world. God weaves something from that and turns it into good. And Joseph's story is an example of that. If you read on through it in the next chapters in Genesis, you'll see the way in which God does bring great good out of both the sickness of the world and the evil of human action. We see that too in the story of Jesus Christ, whose own life was one that was lived in human weakness. He suffered sickness and the pain of being in this age of the world. It's one that's mixed up with the story of evil human action, evil action towards him by those who hated and despised him. But it's also the story of the good that came about in the way in which God's glory became revealed to humanity as the amazing plan for Jesus' resurrection, for his victory over death and evil, for his victory over suffering, was found in the way that he experienced death at the hands of other human beings. So where Joseph was only threatened with death, certainly his brothers intended harm to come to him, Jesus experienced something far worse. But just as great good came to God's people because of Joseph's actions, so a much greater good comes to us because of Jesus' actions. And so through that experience of suffering, through that experience of difficulty, we see God's glory revealed. And the same is true today. We no doubt experience, all of us, harm done to us by other people. We certainly experience the sickness and the brokenness of the world. And for many of you, in the midst of lockdown, if you're in Tāmaki Makaurau, or in at least the sense of the disruption of normal life again, for those who are in level 2, our experience of God's glory comes to us as we see God moving people to act in ways that reflect his image more clearly. And that often arises out of suffering. It's certainly more clearly visible when we see the contrast between the suffering that we experience and the glory of God that's being revealed. And so when we come to Lent, we do so out of a sense of celebration and gratitude that God's glory has been seen. And I want to encourage you just to cast your mind back over the most recent days and weeks and think perhaps of an opportunity when you've seen the image of God revealed, where you've seen God's redemptive power through the Lord Jesus Christ displayed in somebody who you know. And out of gratitude for the way in which God's glory is being revealed, even in the midst of brokenness, to approach the season of Lent wanting to respond to God's gratitude with a spirit of being willing to sacrifice something in response, to show that we've understood that just as Jesus displayed the glory of the Father more clearly as he sacrificed, as he gave something up, we too can not only give thanks for the experience that we've had of God's glory being made visible to us, but by acquiring the habit of a life lived in sacrifice, a life that's poured out towards God, that we too during the season of Lent can do this not only to respond to God's glory, but to make God's glory more visible to other people. It's always the paradox of Christianity that God's glory is not seen in our human experience most clearly in his power and in his in some sort of human glory, but is instead seen in the face of Jesus Christ. So if we've encountered Jesus in our own lives through other people and through God's work, let's work over Lent to do that, to show that more clearly to others. Now, of course, tonight, Shrove Tuesday, was traditionally kind of a pancake night. I guess it depends a little bit what you've got in your cupboards, but it's a last celebration, a last celebratory moment of that glory of God before we come to the pattern of discipline. So I want to encourage you, in perhaps alone in your home, or perhaps with others, to have a celebration, to look back with gratitude before God, so that we're then able to start the season of Lent, not out of a sense of guilt or burden, but a response of a grateful heart. Amen. By the way, I do apologise. I don't think the words are coming up on the screen this morning, so you'll just have to either listen in carefully, or perhaps you'll know the prayer. I'll say the Lord's Prayer and then the grace, both in Māori. Ki inoi tātou. E tō mātou matu i te rangi, kia tapu tō ingoa, kia tai mai tau rangatiratanga, kia mea tia tau e pai ai ki runga ki te whenua, kia rita anō ki tō rangi. Ho mai kia mātou ai nei he taro ma mātou mō tēnei rā, burua o mātou hara, me mātou hoki muru nei i o te hunga e hara ana kia mātou. Aua hoki mātou e kawea kia whakawaia, e ngari whakorangia mātou i te kino. Nau hoki te rangatiratanga, te kaha me te kororia, ake. Āmene. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te atawhai o tō tātou ariki o ihu karaiti. Me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhi ngā tahitanga ki tu wairua tapu. Ake, ake ake. Āmine. Kia ora mai